Hi everybody, Todd Dammit Kerns here once again. Today brought to you by Rock and Roll Relic Guitars. Why not? Ladies and gentlemen, today a very good friend of mine, I'm a big fan of everything he's done. I was a big follower of his band Jetboy back in the day. Great Hollywood Sunset Strip band. He now plays with Buckcherry, which is really exciting, but he also has his own guitar company, Rock and Roll Relics, which is one of my favorite guitar companies out there right now, and I highly recommend you check them out. Ladies and gentlemen, my dear friend, Billy Rowe. There you go. Just so you know, it's like, heads up, you're being recorded.
That's the new thing now,
I
right?
know. It's like, I love it. It's sort of like a FBI or something. So you guys are out. How many shows in are you right now? Like, how long have you been out right now?
We started in May, I want to say.
Oh, it's
And
that long. Oh, wow.
yeah, the band's got they do it really like 2-3 weeks and then go home for a few days, 2-3 weeks, go home for a few days. So
How's that been? I mean, because I know you've been off the road for, I mean, in that length of,
yeah,
time.
long time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, luckily enough, I mean, with Rock and Roll Relics, my guitar company, I just got to it fell into great timing, perfect timing. I moved the shop from SF to LA and slowly built up, more business and hired another guy and
That's so crazy.
and it was just a perfect timing where like, yeah, I could do this. It was my goal, to like be able to get into a situation like this. So it's just, yeah, it's amazing.
It's funny how things just kind of line up that way, isn't it?
They do. It's all in that timing,
Yeah.
and it's fun. So we started building the Friedman guitars as of like 2 months ago. So
Oh,
it's
wow.
not really out there yet, but it's not a secret, but it's gonna, we're gonna do a thing on it. But so that's really helped me allow to bring in another guy and really build up, you know, good guys, at the shop where they can hold down the fort when I'm gone. Now I'm on the laptop more in the lobbies doing all the paperwork stuff and ordering and
Of course, yeah. So are the Friedman guitars a completely separate design? I mean, I know you probably can't talk too much about it, but is it like
yeah. Well, it
its
was
own
the
thing?
Friedman guitars were, Friedman amps, of course.
Yes,
So
of
he
course, yeah.
started doing guitars and Grover Jackson was building them.
Oh, okay.
So as of last year, Grover Jackson, was ready to kind of move on into the retirement world and kind of just do less. He's done
Yeah.
his time, of course, and so they needed somebody. They looked at the overhaul of like, this is a new guitar brand and for Friedman, and they
Hmm.
want overall long haul. So they wanted somebody who's kind of got some more years on him.
Yeah, yeah.
So I've known Dave Friedman for a long time and Rob, his partner, and it's great. It was like, again, it was perfect timing.
I don't know which road to go down because there's so many things I want to talk about. Like the guitars alone he feels like that's about 5 hours. Like,
5 hours.
and,
I know, and I know I could talk to you about the obscure rock stuff, the
and
meaningless, useless rock information that I just can talk all day about.
I know it's funny that we haven't really. I've met you a couple times at NAMM. A lot of my friends, guitar nerds, were very big on Rock and Roll Relics before I ever came across you, and they were
Uh-huh.
like, "Oh, it's Billy's company." I go, "Billy Rowe from Jetboy, cool." And then, a lot of guitar guys who are like hardcore, just old school guitar players, just
Mhm.
really love your stuff. And I just did a record in Orlando with Michael Basquette, Elvis. He does all the Alter Bridge and Slash stuff that we do.
Uh-huh.
Another project that I can't talk about, but your
Right.
guitars were prominently used on the session. He has a bunch of your
Awesome.
stuff. It's
Yeah.
great. I mean, it's one of those interesting things, and I've had this conversation a lot when it comes to you came up, especially on the Sunset Strip, in Hollywood.
Mhm.
It was interesting to see when you guys came out, like when Jetboy kind of happened.
Mhm.
There was this sort of, and I've had this conversation so many times because that custom right there is an 83 and I bought it in 89. And at the time we're still talking about a time where everybody was playing, you know like
Yeah.
like pointy super strats essentially.
Uh-huh. Exactly.
And you must have seen it in real time because when you guys came along, playing Les Pauls or
Mm,
Explorers, and where
mm.
he's playing the big white Falcon and stuff like that. That stuff was an exception to a much larger rule at that point. These were kind of like, you know, oh, those are old guitars, man. You know, kind of like that's the way people thought of it. But I was always sort of akin to that sort of during that period, and I talk about this a lot. I go, well, there was bands like Tesla or Kicks or a
Mhm.
few guys who were still playing Les Pauls while everybody else was playing a super crazy, you know, BC
Yeah.
Riches, Kramers, Jacksons, all that kind of stuff. Were
Mhm.
you always kind of more of like an old school, like rock
Uh,
guitar guy, or
yeah, I guess so. I mean, for me, I guess personally, it was really the bands I was into at the time and the guitar heroes, which of
sure,
course
yeah.
goes back to Ace Frehley, but for the Jetboy years, and this could be spoken for, I know, for the GNR guys and LA Guns and all that was
Mm-hmm.
Hanoi Rocks. Hanoi
Yeah.
Rocks was really a humongous influence on a lot of these bands. And what did they play? But all vintage, and not, I mean, all kinds of vintage, from V's to Epiphone hollow bodies to Les Pauls to, Silver Bursts to Juniors. So yeah, and of course Kicks was a big influence, and they were all vintage guys. So
It's so cool to hear you say that because I have this conversation a lot, and I've been lucky enough to be on stage with Sammy and Michael and
yeah.
that whole crew is it's because so many people have sort of they have this idea that Hanoi was sort of a hair metal band when in reality they were such a throwback to like there's punk in there, there's definitely a lot of like
Mhm.
70s glitter rock and all the things that we love, you know what I mean.
Exactly.
In fact, there's very little what you would consider metal in there at all.
Yeah.
It's just like a straight up rock band. The fact that Michael's playing saxophone and harmonica and all these kind of old school rock and roll type things. And you're
Mhm.
exactly right, like lots of big hollow bodies, lots of old school looking guitars, and
Mhm.
it was sort of like the next sort of phase of what the New York Dolls could have been in a way. To me, I felt like that Hanoi
Yeah.
kind of came out of that, with
Exactly. Yeah.
probably more focus on songwriting, more focus on musicality to some degree, you know what I mean,
Mhm.
and all that. And the
Yeah.
fact that you guys, I found Jetboy because Sammy Yaffa, the bass player from
Right.
Hanoi, was suddenly in your band, and I was like,
Yeah.
whoa, whoa, whoa,
Exactly.
what? Because it was like, because when Hanoi broke up, it was such a like a giant hole in that world for those of us that were sort of like invested at that point.
Mhm.
And in finding you guys, that must have been a real trip. Getting we'll just get the bass player.
It was a total trip, and it,
Yeah,
and it worked. It was just one of those things our manager asked. I remember it's like, if you could have any bass player, who would it be? And I'm pretty sure I said Sam Yaffa.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And funny enough, it happened.
And especially considering he's like in Helsinki or something. It's like, how do you? Was he already trying to make his way to the States, or was that just kind of like?
He was actually in Sweden. He had just split up with his girlfriend at the time, who they had a kid, Nikki, his
Mm-hmm,
son.
mm-hmm.
And I believe she was like cleaning the apartment they were living in, or they moved out, and the phone rang, and our manager knew somebody in Sweden at Warner Brothers Chapel at the publishing or something, who it was one of those things. And Sammy I think he was in England visiting his old manager from Hanoi, and got the message to him, listened to a demo, and just went for it. And came
Crazy.
forward.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would imagine that was probably the impetus of his, because he was in the States for a long time after that.
Yeah. 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 He said
Yeah.
to me, I mean, we're still buds and brothers that, joined at the hip because of our history and
Mm-hmm.
friendship. And yeah, he said a lot of it had to do when he came over to the States was the beginning you know, was joining Jetboy. And from there on, it was, spawning the relationships to where he's at now.
Yeah. In all the
So
times I've been playing with him, he's always playing one of your basses,
yeah,
Rock and
yeah,
Roll
we
Rocks
did that
bass. Yeah.
that custom
It's
one for him with
sounds
the
great. It's
yeah.
really great. It's a really great player. Considering he was playing a really cool old jazz that always sounded really great. So the
Yeah, I think it
fact
was
that
like the Seafoam one.
yeah, yeah. And the
It's
fact that
signed by Dennis Dunaway too.
that's right. Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah. He had to have it signed by him.
Oh,
Um,
of course.
but we've jumped so far forward because there's so much of this. I love to start with like how you get into music, where you're from, and all that kind of stuff. Did you grow up in the Bay Area? So
I grew up in San Francisco proper, right in the heart of the city. I'm a
cool.
third generation native, went to all the schools and in San Francisco. And luckily enough, growing up at that time, you had Bill Graham Presents, you had
Yeah,
so many artists. I mean, I was talking to Stevie D, Buckcherry's guitar player, about, how many bands are from the Bay Area that
totally.
I didn't even realize till you start naming them off. So it was a huge, growing up as a kid, it was like just music capital.
Totally. Yeah.
So,
Well, so, and that's kind of interesting too, because like you say, sometimes it's, it's a real kind of like eye opener when there is stuff in your backyard. It makes you feel like, oh, well, then I can do this. It's one thing when you're just thinking about bands from London or New York or whatever,
sure.
but the fact that you guys actually had stuff, springing up all around you must have been really
Yeah,
inspiring.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but the first band for me, I mean, it was of course AM radio and Elton John and Glenn Campbell and Cliff Richard and all that stuff. But it was really in 1975. My buddy to this day, I talked to him yesterday. My buddy Alex, who turned me on to Kiss, and that was it. He says you got to hear this record. It was Kiss Alive. And he turned me on the guitar. I bought my first electric from him, his hand-me-down Memphis. And to this day, he still plays. He's a ripping player and follows current music and everything. So that was really my introduction to like, holy shit, looking at Ace Frehley with that tobacco burst on the last page of the insert, the booklet on the side of Live.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the same for me. That's really the gateway drug to everything, isn't it? Kiss Alive 1 is sort of, I mean, I don't even remember if it was like, I think by the time I'm a little younger than you, but by the time we got into it, there was, a catalog of Kiss records to get into. So, but Kiss Alive 1 was the one we were just like, what is this? And the fact that it essentially acts as a greatest hits package of the first 3 albums.
Right.
And they're in live form, so it makes them higher energy. The guitars are a little heavier, the drums are bigger, because the recordings were always not quite there in a lot of ways in the first 3 records. Although I will argue that some of their best music ever is in those first 3 records.
I agree. I totally agree. And it's the obscure songs that they never play.
I know. Yeah. Like Love Her All I Can, or, all that
home.
stuff. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. All that stuff is the best.
Mainline.
All the way. Yeah.
All the way. Exactly.
And the funniest thing is, it's like, well, I play the Kiss Cruise. I'll be doing the Kiss Cruise if all goes well this year. And you can bust out, no one wants to hear Shout It Out Loud and Detroit Rock City. We all love those songs, but they want to hear the deeper you can dig, the better. So guys like you and me are in heaven in those kind of like, just play deep cuts, Room Service, Ladies in Waiting, just kind of.
Oh, man, there's so many great ones from those records,
Yeah, and they remain great. I mean, when you get into Rock and Roll Over and Love Gun and all that stuff that goes on. But it really is interesting that you bring that up, because that is a big part of that, looking at the back of the album, and Kiss plays Gibson guitars because they want the best. You're like, oh, okay. And you're kind of like, okay, that's what that is. And you sort of, whether it's Peter Frampton or whoever, you just pay attention to the Les Paul or the Flying V or the Explorer or the Firebird, and you see that those images, those guitars go on, well, till this day, really. I mean, they probably after we're dead and gone, those guitars will still appear in whatever form. Yeah.
And Paul played a lot of obscure stuff. I mean, he played the Marauder, was the one he smashed,
He did. Yeah. I've always wanted to get a Marauder just for that. I actually think there's something really cool about it. And Billy Gibbons does this. He'll have like an SG or something like that, but he'll have like a Flying V headstock on it, which I think is really kind of it's kind of an underutilized look. I think having that headstock on other guitars makes it really interesting.
Yeah.
You ever remember Rick Nielsen having the Explorer neck on a Les Paul and being like, what the hell is that? It's so weird.
Yeah.
But the mixing and matching of guitars that way. Rick Nielsen is another big one for me. Like, and Billy Gibbons, those guys who just kind of like, they have a real weakness for the crazier the guitar model, the more they're kind of all over it. So
definitely, he was a huge guitar hero of mine to this day. And I mean, to me, it's our generation's Beatles.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
I mean, I followed them every record to this day.
Yeah. And they never disappoint.
No, never.
So when you got into, how long is it before you start playing in bands then, once you kind of get that first Memphis guitar or whatever?
I mean, that was the 70s. That had to have been like 78 or something like that, So, I started taking guitar lessons, and it was really the first thing my parents get was like a nylon string acoustic. And I'm like,
oh, sure, yeah.
Couple lessons, and I'm like, this just is not working, So, but it was later on, there was this teacher in San Francisco, Joe DeLaura, who my friend Alex turned me on to, and he looked like Eddie Van Halen, and this must have been by 79 or 80. It must have been 79 or 80 because he was a Van Halen nut. And then that was the guy. I had the Memphis and took that. He taught you like basic scales, arpeggios and rock scales, and then you can learn a song, bring a song in every week. And
That's amazing.
that's kind of where it all started for me. And then, I started playing. The band Jetboy started really early on, but in high school, I had a band with my buddy Eric. He was the drummer, and I was super into the new wave of British heavy metal movement, which hit San Francisco hard, as most people know from the bands that are from there metal wise.
Yeah, totally.
And we do covers of Def Leppard, Wasted, and Judas Priest, Beyond the Realms of Death, and all.
Nice.
Shit, it's like,
yeah, we all kind of went down that road. I mean, that new wave of heavy metal was a big deal, man. Like all those bands, like all that stuff was really Saxon. Like everything that just came out of there was just like, whoa, what is this? It really spoke to us Midwestern white boys, I guess, just kind of.
It was
West Coast
movement. Big movement. Motorhead, Saxon, like Tank. Angel Witch, now Scorpions fell into that, and Judas Priest, and even Def Leppard.
Yeah, big time. Did you ever get bit by that Eddie Van Halen bug, like the Randy Rhoads and George Lynch? Did you go down that road as a guitar player?
I didn't. I went more down that road as a fan, and I think early on I kind of knew what my hands can do.
Right.
About that can go down that fast lane, and mine went down the Malcolm lane.
yeah,
which is great. Which is, a lot of people go fast, can't do the Malcolm. So
exactly, that's my preferred lane anyway. I was always more Keith and Malcolm and Angus, obviously too, because you have a lot of Angus in you as well. The AC/DC and the Ace Frehley and the Rick Nielsen. To me, I always felt like I didn't feel like there needed to be any more than that. Frankly, I thought that those guys were saying a lot in the 30 seconds of a guitar solo that they had, or 8 seconds, sometimes 9 seconds, whatever. I just thought like they said everything that needed to be said. I didn't feel like, as much, I'm the same as you. I was like, I thought, wow, isn't this guy amazing? Like Eddie Van Halen or Randy Rhoads or George Lynch or Warren DeMartini or whoever of those guys, like everybody back then. But it just never made me go like, I want to play like that. I always thought, no, I prefer, without really kind of putting it into words, I think I just always kind of gravitated more towards a Johnny Thunders than I did to that's just who I am. I'm like, but I like that, I know it's unpolished and it's, and I can probably do it right now, play that myself. There was something about that spoke more to me than killing myself and like I say, there were other guys who were just naturally gifted and could go that route. And I was like, that's what they should do. For me, it was more like, I like this thing,
Yeah, I mean, I got very into Van Halen. I saw them a few times in the early days. I got very into the Ozzy records and Randy Rhoads, Hero, and another one would be Michael Schenker.
Yeah, Michael.
And then even Paul Chapman of the UFO era of the later, which I'm a huge fan of that stuff too. So but just guitar wise, that's what's cool. Like you say about Thunders and being into that stuff, that next generation who got into both those types, they mashed that up and created this whole cool new style of rock and roll guitar player that met kind of punk, glam.
Totally.
Stuff. And
well, it's funny too, because when you talk about that shift from sort of what, when we talk about the Sunset Strip rock groups, there was a lot of, the guitar's up here, it's, real super fast, big hair, all that kind of stuff, all the things that we equate with that particular phase. But you guys sort of came with that wave. It's kind of like talking about like the 90s grunge thing, when in reality, none of those bands sound the same. But I always sort of say bands like Guns, both LA and Guns N' Roses, Guns N' Roses, LA Guns, yourselves, Faster Pussycat, a bunch of those groups that came out that were more street, more Hanoi oriented, more, it wasn't so much about. Slash was flashy in a more rootsy kind of way than the previous sort of wave of guys. But I know it's weird to say that, but it was sort of this new wave of like, it wasn't so much about, it was so much less polished, and it sort of more spoke to what I'm talking about, like bands like the Dolls and Kiss and stuff that I loved. This sort of wave that kind of happened in the late 80s into the early 90s was more like, oh wow, I get this. And you guys had so much more of a, well, because Mickey had the mohawk and all that kind of stuff. It was like, and the Hanoi kind of vibe going on. It was like really spoke to that, to that wave of
right.
Of
I think that generation, like those bands you mentioned, I always say it was like, GNR, Jetboy, you know, LA Guns and Faster. And what we had in common, of course, the influence of Hanoi and all that, but it was really rock and roll and punk rock.
Totally.
And, you know, all those bands had roots in punk, and it meshed it together and created this total new style that was loose, but tight at the same time.
I totally agree.
You know,
and it's sort of in a way, you know, it's almost a prep for what was coming. You know what I mean? Like that sort of step away from real slick musicality and all that kind of stuff, and more being about, like, you know, just a punch in the gut with a great A chord and a cool song, you know. And it sort of kept evolving into what I suppose would have come in the 90s, but it was huge. I mean, like, they talk about the Sunset Strip as if, oh, you know, it was just over at one point, but in a lot of ways, that whole Cat House vibe that sort of happened with you guys and Faster and all that kind of stuff was bigger than ever, in my opinion. Like, it sort of seemed like it was at its sort of nadir peak at that point.
Yeah. I mean, you would go to a Cat House on a regular night when it was peaking, and it was packed.
I bet.
Outside, inside, down the streets, you know, fast food restaurants, Denny's, everything was packed with just rock and roll kids.
It's surreal, right? Like, we just did the Rainbow Bar and Grill's Backyard Bash.
Oh, did you do that? Cool.
Yeah, just the other day, and it was surreal because there's sort of like this, you know, this yearning for a different time when things were like that. You know what I mean? Like, although the Sunset Strip still holds a great deal of that magic still in those streets, it's always going to be there, you know, in that pavement. It must have been a trip being like one of those handful of bands that was, you know, a part of that wave. You guys must have been like living the dream.
Yeah, it was great. And, you know, you're so in it that you look at it now and go like, wow, that was really a special time. But when you're in it, you're like, well, this is just how it is. You're in the moment, I guess.
And there is a weird feeling probably that it's always going to be this way, in a way. Like, you know, whether you guys keep going or not, it will just always, this scene will always be around. The fact that it kind of closed shop or kind of like shut itself down is sort of must have been surreal when that happened.
Yeah, it shifted quick.
It did, yeah. But so when you guys, when Jetboy, were you technically signed and like before Sammy became part of the picture?
We were, yeah. We signed him. It was 1986.
Was that early? Okay.
Yeah, with Elektra. We signed. We signed shortly after GNR signed with Geffen. It was kind of like Poison were the first to, you know, the label or whatever, and then GNR, then Jetboy, then Faster, LA Guns. So we signed in '86, and we moved down to LA at that point.
Oh, so you weren't even a Hollywood band at that point?
No, we were going back and forth up to around November of 1986, and we just, when we knew we were getting, the deal was done and we were going to get some money to live, we moved into, you know, a shithole motel on Melrose and Vine, and
as you do.
Story began.
That's so great. So then, like, now, how many years are we talking then? Like, how many years did Jetboy survive till the initial wave kind of stopped?
We technically started, Fernie and I started the band, and we met in '83.
Oh, okay.
And we really had the members, everybody pretty concrete by early '84, mid. It was because I remember I was still in high school.
Oh, wow. Yeah, there you go.
Know, so our first shows were like right when I got out of high school. I remember the first show we actually played was another good buddy of mine who I grew up going to shows with as a kid. He threw parties all the time. He still does. And we played a high school party that he did.
Right.
And that was the first gig. And then we played the Mabuhay Gardens like a month or so later. And that was like the beginning. That was '84. So it had been like August of '84.
Crazy. Yeah, it's funny because and '84 is still way early. Like, we're still talking like, well, when did the Quiet Riot's record come out? Was it '83? Something like that?
That would have been like, I think like '82, '83.
Is it that early? Wow. Because it
had to have been around the same time as Pyromania, right?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Something
So,
like
but that sort of street Hanoi type thing wasn't really happening in America just yet, was it? Or if it was, it wasn't sort of recognized yet.
No, but we were aware of it. I mean, Fern and I discovered Hanoi probably in '83, early '80, probably '83. And that's really what everybody who joined the band, who came in, there was a Hanoi connection because we were
Sure.
all into it and all from different parts of the Bay Area.
Cool.
There was definitely a good underground scene of those bands. And of course, you throw Lords of the New Church in there.
Yeah,
That was like a huge part
totally.
of that scene.
It is funny, isn't it? Like when you consider, like, you know, how I think, you know, I'm sort of in the same boat where it's kind of like you could go through things like the new wave of British metal and finding it. Well, although I was always into punk rock too. Like, you know, we coming from a small town, we just liked what we liked. We didn't really talk about like, well, it's like Joey Ramone has long hair. So it's kind of, you know, it all kind of seemed the same. Iggy Pop had long hair. It all seemed the same to us in its own way. But, and I suppose there's that marriage of liking like heavier, louder music that just sort of morphs into the sort of more punk rock aspect of what it is. And then it sort of turns into things like Hanoi Rocks, where, I mean, Back from Mystery City was the first album I'd ever heard. And it was like, and it was like, what is this? Like, we just had to stop and kind of,
I know.
It's sort of really kind of, I don't know. It just seems so much more elevated in a way than elevated and throwback at the same time. You know what I mean? Like very forward moving, but also very sort of like rooted in something. And you definitely got a feeling like this is way cooler than what's kind of going on in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And a lot of it, the image, I mean, you know,
the image,
people don't want to talk about image stuff sometimes, but that band to this, if they came out today, it would be cool and cutting edge. It's like they were so ahead of the curve and on top of everything when it came to that. And then, the songs were punk and rock at the same time, very blues, you know?
Yeah. And like you said, exactly. And like you said, oh, totally. And like you said, the guitar playing solo aspect was so much different than what we were accustomed to hearing in a more polished sense of the word.
Right.
So then at what point did you guys go till like that, and before you eventually sort of took your foot off the gas, you know what I'm saying? With Jetboy?
It would be after the second album, Damnation, came out. When Jetboy slowed down, and it just was when we got dropped from MCA.
Right. Now, is that in part, do you think, because of a shifting in the music industry?
Yeah, I think that. So. Yeah. There was 90s, so things were changing, and you know, it just completely shifted. So, but we got dropped twice. So we were on Elektra.
That's
got dropped in 87. And
right.
Done. The record was finished, ready to roll. The whole advances went out. We were getting reviews already and Hit Parader, and then we got dropped.
Really? Wow, I wasn't aware of that. That's so like that, to be that far along and then for them to suddenly pull the carpet out from under you just seems crazy.
Yeah, but that was the tough part, you know, that we lost all this momentum. We were right there. It should have been out like late 87, early 88, but we got dropped and then luckily picked up by MCA right away, but it took like 9 months.
Yeah.
You know, so it wasn't until the end of 88, and you know, you lose a few months and it's kind of over in a lot of ways.
Music industry is one of the most bizarre business models that way. You know, no other business works that way. You know, it's like,
I know.
Okay. And the fact that you guys kind of, you know, pulled out of that nosedive into a whole other situation is amazing.
Yeah, we were lucky too. You know, the hardest part is we turned into followers instead of leaders.
Right.
Although that was the hardest thing to this day, it's hard to follow. Some people still don't know, you know, that the whole story.
Yeah, because you guys had been doing it much longer than most of the bands that sort of came up around while you guys were frozen in between labels. There were other bands coming along, sort of copying your vibe.
Exactly.
So what did how did the Rock and Roll Relics guitar company come about? I mean, I know we're going to jump from like, you know, Jetboy kind of taking a break into
well, I mean, you know, through all these years that we talked about, I was always into tinkering on guitars. I built a guitar in high school.
Oh, okay.
I can probably say now Eddie Van Halen was the influence to build it. It was a Star guitar.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know? And I still have it to this day.
Like
it doesn't
a
have
Star,
like the Shark guitar, but like the Star body, DiMarzio.
Sure,
you know, like the Mighty Mites or whatever.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
So I built one of those in high school, and then just through the years, I was always into painting guitars, and you know, of course, I destroyed some classics, you know, but back then they were just cheap used guitars.
Yeah.
You know? So, and then, you know, just it was really after, you know, Jetboy ended and I moved back to SF within a few years. I don't know, somebody came across some vintage stuff and I kind of restored some of them, sold them. And then eBay comes along, you know, and I started seeing this relic thing.
Right.
Ash guitars is probably the first one I saw. And so I just started
Okay.
doing some replicas for fun, sold them on eBay. And then one thing just led to another. And it just kind of, really it was super organic, no plans, no anything. And here we are.
That's so cool. Yeah. So what year would you have started, like when you officially called it Rock and Roll Relics? Stamp that on the headstock kind of thing.
Yeah, it would have been, man, that's like, I'm so bad with time, it's just, it would have been probably 2005 or six or something
So
like that.
it's been a significant amount of time then.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's
Yeah,
been
yeah.
15 or more years.
Do you remember your first NAM as Rock and Roll Relics?
First NAM was, God, that's probably going on 8 to 9 years ago.
Yeah, well, it made a major impact because, like I said, a lot of my friends who were guitar nerds were the guys saying, "Have you heard of this company?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm a guitar nerd, but I'm also like very like cheap." Yeah. No, yeah, you wouldn't believe it, but I'm like, don't tell me about the new guitar company because then I'll have to go look at their stuff and
I know.
Damn it.
Yeah, you got to pick and choose.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I get it.
Like, do we get the diapers for the baby or pay the mortgage or do like that whole kind of, or do I buy a new guitar? Yeah.
Right.
But no, I'm a really big fan of what you do. And I think that you have all the right sensibilities that, because no matter what happens, it's a lot of new companies come along and you go, well, that's kind of cool, but they kind of lost me here. You know what I mean? But you kind of got all the right sort of like elements to it that I think really kind of a lot of us kind of like, vintage guitar nerds kind of, we sort of gravitate towards what you're doing. Absolutely.
Right. Well, that's what's so great about it is because, going to the other side of the fence for me is basically what I did, it's like, but I'm from that other side. So it's like, I'm mashing it up in a sense, so.
Yeah, it's got to be that way because I think it'd be really interesting as a player who continues to be playing and going on stage and all that kind of stuff. It's one thing to have been a player and sort of check out and kind of flow into the background and all that, but actually still being like, you're still on stage, you're still in the game. And then like designing these guitars must be kind of like a blast to kind of go, well, what would I want to play on stage? What would I want to see on stage?
Right.
And I assume you're playing all your own stuff, like with Buckcherry and these stuff.
Yeah, right now I'm playing all my own stuff. I'm playing, the Revenge model, which is the newest, which I'm super pumped on. I got the Starfighter and then the Lightning hollow body.
Cool. What's the Revenge model look like?
It's an offset, so it's kind of
those are my favorite.
Yeah, it's an offset. It could kind of go, I don't know, there's a bunch of different shapes. You could say Firebirdish or you could say Jazzmaster,
All my favorites. Yeah, that's my favorite.
You put them up to each other, they're totally
There's
different.
A non-reverse, right? I'm trying to get to it.
Yeah, I was a big fan of the non-reverse.
Right,
yeah. I could see it, the triple pickup. Paul Chapman played one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's one of my favorites is the, just the non-reverse. Firebirds and Thunderbirds in general.
Yeah, I prefer the non-reverse as well.
Yeah. It just has this sort of very unique, what am I looking at kind of thing to that guitar. And and those P90s sound nuts.
The P90s are great.
Yeah. That's really cool. So where do you foresee this going from here as far as the company? Do you just keep I mean, it's interesting watching you spin into like Friedman and all that kind of stuff too. So there's these sort of doors open into new opportunities all the time, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there's really just I just want to grow the business, and with the Friedman thing, the boutique amp distribution, who is the umbrella of the Friedman and a lot of other brands as well. The owner wants to do a guitar division, so we're actually in the middle of this right now, dealing with building and just bringing everything into one building and just start ramp up the quantity. And I got a great crew of guys. They're all like rock dudes. They're in their mid to late 30s and they all get along and they love being there. And so it's cool bringing in this team of people who are fans of, the rock
all the same stuff. Yeah.
Rock. They're all fans of the ripping guitar players and, so it's kind of cool.
Where is the company based? I mean, where are you?
We're in North Hollywood right now.
One of these days I'm going to come harass you to check it out. I love looking at it. Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah.
So let's talk about briefly before I keep you too long, how this Buckcherry thing came about. It's so cool because I was just telling a friend the other day, I remember waiting in line for the Phantom Menace. This is a weird story. It was Star Wars. And then a friend came along and goes, hey, dude, Buckcherry's playing. It was in Vancouver, Canada. I'm like, and I remember just kind of like whoever I was with, I was like, I'll be right back. And I ran over and watched Buckcherry. This is way like the first album kind of stuff, you know, with Keith and everybody still in it. And I was like, because they were, you know, it was a big deal because they were the first sort of throwback is the wrong word probably. They were sort of modern, but they had elements of like that stuff that we all kind of grew up on. And it's been really cool watching the band sort of evolve, you know, like so many bands. They kind of went away for a minute, came back bigger than ever, and then like, you know, and then still going strong now. And then, you know, when I heard you were playing with them, I go, oh my God, that's such a perfect, you know, I couldn't think of anybody more perfect just to kind of slide right in there and play with those guys.
It was perfect for me.
It was one of those things where, I don't know, they're one of those bands, if you get the wrong guy in that band, it would be, that's a shame. You know, it'd be like kind of like, you know, like he's a great guitar player, but he's not right for this band. And I thought, Billy'd be perfect for that band. So how'd that all come about? You were friends with those guys, I assume?
Yeah, I was friends. I became friends with Stevie when he joined the band. And I think it became because I knew Jimmy, their former bass player, for many, many years when he was Izzy's band and Broken Homes and all that. And Stevie and I, of course, became, you know, we're born in the same year. We're just a few months apart, grew up on all the same stuff. I mean, that's all we talk about on the bus is all the old school and the bands. And you know, he was, of course, into the guitar. So I built him a couple of guitars and just through the years, always, you know, kept a relationship. And this door opened and he just called me and just said, I know you got the business and all this, but you're the right guy for the gig. And I'm like, oh, well, it's kind of good timing for me. I said, I'm gonna have to like do some shuffling with the with work stuff. But I said, but I want to make this happen, you know? And
I never really thought about that. Yeah. Because you live in the dream of establishing a company and getting it to a point where it's really working. It's really going great. Was there kind of a moment where you were kind of like, maybe not, or were you just sort of like, it just happened to be perfect timing where you went like, I'm going to go do this?
Yeah, it really came at perfect timing because the Friedman thing just landed. It was just about to hit.
Cool.
And it was still going to be a few months before anything started with the band because, well, last year we just did these fly dates. So it was just little sprinkles here and there that happened.
Right.
So that was easy, you know.
That's manageable. Yeah.
Manageable. And then through all that, I just focused on just making it work. You know, and the Friedman stuff landed at the right time. I hired another guy and and now it's just, you know, when I stepped off the ledge, I was a little nervous, you know, but now that I've been doing this for a while, it's actually functioning better in a lot of ways. You know, sometimes you gotta just let go because when I'm there, you know, micromanage, try to control everything because it's your baby and all that. And the best thing you could do is you just gotta let go, you know, and that's when things really start to go to the next level.
Yeah, that's true. I never thought of that. Yeah, because it's, you know, at a certain point, anybody who's ever done anything, Elon Musk may not be there for every nut and bolt in a Tesla. You know, it's like,
exactly.
It's the way these things have to work. But it's so exciting to watch all that happen. Now, do you still do the odd show? I know that the Jetboy was doing stuff now and again. Mickey's out here now. Mickey's in Vegas.
He's in Vegas.
I don't see him, but I have to look him up.
He just moved. It'll be a year in November that he got there. And, you know, we were doing those shows. We did that record in 2019. And it's, you know, it's with Jetboy, it's always been kind of like when everybody's lives line up, you know, where we can do it, we'll do it, you know. But we're scheduled to do like a covers album.
Cool.
And kind of want to get a bunch of guests on it, you know, probably hit you up and on that.
Please do.
Like cool,
I can only imagine the covers you guys would do. I think that'd be very interesting.
Yeah. We want to go deep and not do like as some people say, a karaoke record, but do something like pull some old school, you know, do like Hall and Oates and
that'd be really cool.
Stuff like that into like turn the notch a little bit on it, you know.
That'd be so cool.
So that's the idea. So that's all we have in plans for night with Jetboy right now. So
that's exciting though. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where the band's never really broken up. It's just kind of like in a, you know, it just swings back around and then can get, you know, if everything lines up, let's go play a show. Let's go do a couple dates.
Exactly. And we're lucky we could do that. So
exactly. That's exactly it.
So it's good.
Well, that's exciting. Well, please keep in touch. And like I say, next time, well, if you happen to be there when I get there, that's what's so funny now is it's like, now you're a touring guy. Now it's like, we may never cross paths, but, there's probably a good chance we'll run into each other in a festival at some point, hopefully, knock on wood. But
yeah, I mean, that'd be great. I mean, I'm sure
amazing.
I know GNR's doing her thing, but Slash jumps off and does it. I mean, maybe we could do some stuff together, man.
That would be really cool. That'd be especially
super
cool. Yeah.
No,
And like I said, I really want to come by and see the shop or the factory or whatever you guys call it in that world.
Yeah.
Because I'm such a guitar
we're
nerd.
North Hollywood now, and then if all goes well, we're going to be moving like, I think it's like 15 miles down towards downtown, but it's going to be a bigger place, have like a showroom and
cool.
And then of course the amp factory's next door, so you can walk through that and
that's so
cool, on all that stuff,
Yeah, I mean, well, Friedman is, a legend in that world for sure.
Yeah.
Great. Well, have an amazing show. I mean, how many more dates you got left on this run?
We got, I think there's four more on this run, and then home for a little bit, some California shows, and then Canada.
Where are you going to Canada?
I'd have to look it up and tell you where.
Somewhere in Canada. Yeah.
We're doing there's quite a few. I think it's like 3 weeks.
Oh, really? Wow. Because it's been such a hassle getting into Canada, but as long as you have, vaccinated and the thing and whatever, you can usually kind of pull it off. So yeah.
I mean, I could geek out on the Canadian bands with you. I was a big fan of that stuff.
There's a lot. There's a lot.
Nick Gilder's probably my all-time.
Really?
Dude,
we just talked to him not that long ago. He's still doing it. Still
I was
sings
wondering what his guitar player, that James McCall, I think his name was, or
that solo on Hot Child in the City. Such a great solo.
He was his co-writer on all those songs.
Yeah, he was.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, April Wine, Bryan Adams, Moxie. I was super into Prism.
Yeah, wow, you're digging deep. I just played a show a few weeks ago with the current version of Prism.
Really?
Yeah.
I saw them.
Did you really?
I saw that. I want to say they opened for Judas Priest for the Point of Entry tour.
That sounds about right. Would have been the right timing anyway, yeah.
Armageddon album, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know, something like that.
That was, they had I mean, they're huge and, they're like one of those legendary groups in Canada, but there's sort of a bit of a kept secret and elsewhere in the world. But yeah, there's a whole world of that stuff. And I have a band called Took with Brent Fitz from Slash's band, and we just cover old Canadian songs, and it's all stuff like that. You'd probably get a kick out of it. I'll send you a link.
I love it. I know I've seen stuff on it. So
yeah, it's fun.
I can get into that. I mean, I was into that Headpins.
Really? Record. Wow. Yeah. We just jammed with the singer like a couple weeks ago.
Really?
At the same show where Prism was playing.
That's too funny.
Man, I can't believe you could dig that deep. Most people don't know what the hell we're talking about when I bring that stuff up.
Yeah. And I don't know that band Saga wasn't from there, were they? No.
They were from Montreal. They're Canadian.
They were. Okay, Saga. Yeah. Okay.
They're real super progressive kind of.
That was another one. Yeah. But that was one of those things, the record stores, I would just find stuff, and just if the cover looked good, I'd buy it.
Remember those days where you'd literally buy a record? How many people bought those Molly Hatchet records based on those album covers?
Man, some of my favorite records are because of the cover.
I know, it's funny.
Great albums, so.
Totally.
Yeah, that's funny. There's definitely, I know there's more, I talked to Danko Jones a while back. I did his podcast a couple of years ago, and the same thing. He's like, "Damn, the Canadian stuff." I'm like, "Dude,
it's impressive, man." It's like you're literally talking about like obscure, even by Canadian standards now. It's sort of like generational. It's like that stuff's 30 years ago, and it's regional, so it becomes kind of if you weren't there, you likely missed that boat. But the fact that you can kind of Danko and we just go on and on, about, well, not just Canadian stuff, because he's that guy too, but yeah.
Right. There's probably more. I think that band that came up the other day was Platinum Blonde.
Oh, wow. You know those guys?
Yeah. I still have the album.
No way. I'm actually friends with those guys. It's so funny. Yeah. Yeah. It's like when we were kids, those guys had like a Beatlemania type thing happening for them, when they first came around.
It was the same thing. It was like during the time of Hanoi. So you would look through and it was glammy and like, reviews, but it didn't matter if it was Duran Duranish or Hanoi, which you just, checked it out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. 100%. I did the same thing, especially when and that stuff was coming out of England and coming out of everywhere back then. It was,
so many bands.
nonstop.
It was so good.
Yeah. Well, Well, thanks so much for hanging out, and we'll do
Yeah.
it in person one of these days. And
Oh yeah, we'll
I
be
really
able
want
to
to I really want to catch you guys with the current lineup. I really want to see it. So when are you? Well, I'll look online for dates because I'll see what. Maybe it'll be in Canada. Maybe I'll be in Canada.
I mean, who knows? It's May. I think it's most of October.
Okay.
So
Right.
and then do November, a little bit trickling out November, and then break for the holidays, and then there's UK dates after
Wow.
Thanksgiving.
Great. So are we allowed to go over there now? I haven't been paying attention to any of this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're all hoping so. I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly. Yeah. Knock on wood. Because
yeah,
I'm supposed to be on the road next year too. And I'm starting to think like, well, does that mean just kind of like floating around the US for as long as possible? Or can we start going, you know,
right.
you guys probably go everywhere too. I would imagine things like Australia are a bit of a long shot. South America, I don't know. It's like, I'm hoping all these things sort of open up soon enough.
I hope so. I mean, these shows have been going really good. This new record, Hellbound's getting a great response.
It's great, man. Yeah, I just checked it out too. It's really great.
Yeah. So, and there's people out there, they're showing up, and it's all been
Awesome.
smooth. I mean,
Where was Hellbound recorded, by the way? I wanted to ask you that.
It was in Nashville, Marty
Oh,
Frederick.
okay. Oh,
Yeah.
Marty. Yeah, okay. Isn't it funny? Because you used to be able to get records and I could look all this up on the record. Now it's like,
I know.
now
Something
it's
I
like,
love reading.
I know. And now I'm like,
photo, who engineered it, all that. This is
I know.
production, liner notes.
Sounds great though. How long were you out in Nashville for?
That knocked it out. I think it was like less than 2 weeks.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Nashville's such a cool place, huh?
Yeah, it's great. And a lot of people live there now that we, of course, rock world.
Yeah, a lot of them are out there. It's so weird.
Yeah, I know.
At Las Vegas and in Nashville. My friends are all spread across, well, and still LA. There's a lot of people in LA.
Vegas was a big, that definitely blew up probably right out of the 80s,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally,
It's close to LA, so
that's kind of why I'm here. Yeah, it only makes sense for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, dude, have an amazing run, and we'll cross paths sooner than later. I don't know.
Oh yeah, there's more to geek out on. I know.
Yeah, yeah, we've only scratched the surface.
Bands like Angel and Piper. Oh my God.
Piper, wow. That Piper that's Billy Squier's band, wasn't it? Yeah, dude. Billy Squier is one of the most underrated songwriter singers there is.
Yeah.
If you get just Billy Squier's greatest hits, you're shocked at how damn good it is. It's like,
oh, it's amazing. Some of his just releases are greatest hits.
I know, just the album alone. Yeah. Bruce Kulick played in some version of Piper, I think.
He played on the first Tale of the Tape, because I did a lot with Bruce. We did that signature with him, and I know you played with Bruce. Bruce is awesome. And he's your neighbor now. Yeah. Of course,
Yeah.
So. But yeah, he did that whole Tale of the Tape album, which is first solo record.
That's right. Yeah. That's a great record too.
That's a great album.
It's funny because I just picked up not that long ago. I was at a record shop and had to pick up the heavy metal Michael Bolton record. I can't remember, so Bruce played in Blackjack with him, so there's all that kind of like, keep trying to harass him because we do Kiss Cruise. Speaking of the Kiss Cruise, we do the Kiss Cruise every year, and we dig deeper and deeper because it's just like, they don't want the normal stuff. We're doing Carnival of Souls. We're doing like, just crazy stuff. And I'm like trying to convince them, well, let's bust something. We should be doing something from the Blackjack. We should do something from Billy Squier, something crazy like that. That'd be really cool. People would probably be excited.
Do some Meatloaf stuff. He toured
Meatloaf. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Him and Bob.
I watched footage of you guys doing. You did some, it was awesome. I mean,
thank you.
I saw a lot of the unmasked, the non-makeup era tours. I was pretty into that too.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I was invested the whole time. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm still invested.
Exactly.
There's Ace Frehley, and then there's Axe Bass, and there's
it's the Budokan burst triple pickup.
Yeah. But it's just a house full of this Arrested Development that I live in. Awesome, man. Well, have fun. And we'll do it again. And we'll do it
for
again,
that
in person with guitars.
Yeah, hopefully maybe we'll share a stage together. That would be
great.
That would be really geek out.
That would be really exciting.
Oh yeah.
Awesome, man. Okay, man. Take care. Thanks so much. Big love. Travel safe out there.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. See ya.